Welcome to In Real Life Wellbeing for Women. I'm your host, and this is your space for science-based strategies, coaching tools, and thoughtful conversations created for real women living real lives. Your well-being deserves attention, not when you reach crisis point, but now. So take this moment, not for your to-do list, but for you. Today's episode is called Change, Resilience, and the Role of Support, because change is one of those topics that gets talked about a lot, but usually in a way that assumes you have energy, clarity, and the capacity. And in real life, that isn't always true. Sometimes change is chosen, sometimes it is unexpected, and sometimes it's a kind of change where nothing looks dramatic from the outside, but internally, everything has shifted. So in this episode, we're going to explore why change can feel so disorienting, what resilience really means in real life, why support matters more than people realize, and a simple way to begin when everything feels unclear. And if you like a deeper written version of this, I've also shared this as a blog article. So let's start with the why and the science. When change arrives, it doesn't always arrive with a clear starting point. It can look like sudden, unexpected challenges. It could be that plans that you had just don't fit anymore, or the old versions of you don't quite fit anymore either. And the next steps feel hard to see because you're trying to make decisions while managing uncertainty, and this stretches your capacity. And many women might feel a few instant thoughts arrive due to this. You may suddenly feel like, I'm not coping well, or I should be managing better than this, or I need to pull myself together and do more in order to get through this. But psychologically, that interpretation isn't the most accurate. Because research on stress and coping shows that what makes situations feel manageable isn't simply the event itself, it's the way we appraise it. In other words, what we believe is happening, what we believe it means, and what we believe we have available to us individually to respond with. And when life changes, sometimes our beliefs become slightly untrue, less evidence-based regarding what's actually going on around us. So change can disrupt our routines, our roles, our identity, relationships, and sometimes the support systems we normally rely on. So it's not that this particular change is bad, and it's not that you're not coping necessarily with this change. It's that your brain and your nervous system are trying to make sense of the new conditions. And in many cases, that sense-making stage is part that feels most uncomfortable, because clarity often comes later. One of the mistakes we make culturally is that we treat resilience like a personal trait, as if resilient people simply cope better, stay calm, stay productive, and bounce back quickly. But resilient science has moved a long way beyond that. Resilience is increasingly understood as something that happens in context. It's shaped by the resources we have, the support, the environment at that time, your relationships at that time, and then the meaning that we're able to make of what's happening. So resilience isn't just something you have. It's something you build, that you access, and you strengthen in real time. And support is not an optional extra in that process. It's one of the key ingredients, because support affects three things that matter during change. Firstly, support changes how safe the situation feels. When you feel alone in change, uncertainty seems to expand. When you feel supported, your nervous system settles enough to think clearly. Secondly, support reduces the pressure to solve everything at once. A supported mind is able to take smaller steps. An unsupported mind often feels it has to resolve everything immediately in isolation. Support protects your identity during transition. So for this third point, one of the hidden difficulties in change is that it can make you question yourself. and support helps you stay connected to what matters, even when the old plans are no longer available. So if you've been thinking, I should be handling this better, or I've dealt with this kind of thing in the past, so why is this one particularly more challenging? I want you to hear this clearly. Change can feel harder, not because we're weak, not because we can't cope, not because we don't have the skills to manage, but because it's asking you to adapt while your resources are shifting too. And so taking action then in real life. Firstly, it is absolutely fine to pause while this change is happening. We know from psychology theory that change is a cyclic process. And the first step of that is once you've got past unawareness that something's coming and you're into an awareness state, the next thing is contemplation. So we all take a moment to think what to do next before that action happens. And with that in mind, taking a moment before action is really important. In that pause, some reflection would support you in managing this change so it feels less overwhelming. So here are 3 steps. It'll take about 5 minutes. You can make a note on your phone or on paper or just hold it mentally. Step 1 is name what has changed. So not the whole story, not the meaning, just the facts. What has actually just happened? So what has changed in your circumstances, your role? And when I say role, this means how you relate to other people and how that influences the way you act and respond in life. So it could be your role as an entrepreneur, your role as a parent, your role as an employee. Your routines, these are the ones that are set because they're out of habits or because they're really important for the responsibilities you hold. And then those responsibilities and also those expectations. What do you believe people are expecting from you? How has that changed? And how has this expectation on yourself changed as well? And often we feel overwhelmed in change because it's unclear what this all means altogether. So naming this change has separated it into situations so that it's no longer about how you feel about the change. Step 2 is to identify what matters most right now. Not in the future, not the big picture, but in this moment. This step matters because change often feels like it's forcing priorities. And when you know the priority right now for you, it reduces internal conflict. So ask what matters most in this moment. This might be your health, family, stability, recovery, finances, relationships, or simply getting through a day with a little more clarity and less pressure. And step 3 is asking what support would help most. The literature is clear that having people around us during any time improves our well-being. So when you're experiencing change, this support is just as fundamental. It's not about finding someone who will fix things for you or someone to offload on, or even a way of admitting that you're unable to cope. The fact that you're asking for support or building that support around you demonstrates that you are looking for resources to manage this change. So this could be support in terms of practical help, emotional support, a space to think, setting clearer boundaries, guidance, or reassurance that you're not navigating this alone. Often, many women wait until they feel like they have everything together before they talk about the change and the concerns they're experiencing. So being honest and suggesting to yourself you could build these supportive resources now as you experience the change to support you also in future experiences. So there's 3 steps. What has changed? What matters most now? What support would help? And then identify one small step. It doesn't need to be perfect. It doesn't need to be massive. It could literally be send a message, have a conversation, book an appointment, take steps towards that new decision, or making space in order to work through this with a little bit more clarity. As with any well-being activity, it's always worth thinking about how to support you with this particular tool in the long run. So the problem most women face is not that they don't know what to do, it's that change doesn't happen in isolation. It happens alongside complexities of family life, work demands, health fluctuations, emotional and physiological ups and downs, and the mental load of keeping all these things moving. So in order to move forward with these ideas of change, it's worth keeping a note of the change cycle. And that is that it's absolutely fine to experience what psychologists call a relapse. So you may feel like you're moving through change and you're ready to make big differences in change, or that change is happening around you and you're prepared for that. And then sometimes suddenly you feel like you're unable to do it, or you can't do those routines. And that's absolutely fine. That is exactly what human nature does. And these are called relapses. We simply come back to the position of pausing. And it's not because we've failed or we're unable to manage the change. It's because it's really complex holding together in your mind the old ways of doing things and then the new ways and all the information you get from that as well. So as you move forward with managing change, remember to pause, to reevaluate and take small steps in the right direction in the areas that matter most to you. So as a recap then, we explored why change can feel disorienting, not because you're doing anything wrong, but because change disrupts capacity, identity, and clarity all at once. We talked about resilience as something contextual and relational, not just personality strength. And we looked at the role of support, because support doesn't just help you cope, it changes the conditions you're coping with. And if you want a simple place to begin, here's your starting point. Name what has changed, identify what matters most, and ask what support would help. Then take one realistic step. Thank you for joining me in Real Life Wellbeing for Women. If today's episode offered something useful or supportive, share it with somebody who'd appreciate it, or explore more inside the Women's Wellbeing Lab. This isn't about doing more, it's about reducing overwhelm, feeling connected to what's important to you in this moment, and feeling well supported. Because well-being isn't a luxury, it's the foundations of health and happiness in real life.